How did ancient armies manage their sanitation during long marches? If soldiers simply took care of business anywhere, wouldn't that be inviting disaster? A single pile of waste, after all, could decide the fate of 100,000 troops. You are General Magnus Val, and once again, you have been reincarnated into a new life this time. As a celebrated military commander of the Ethylene legions, you carry the burden of past lives, granting you a foresight that most mortals lack, especially when it comes to the logistics of war. The northern frontier is in a state of catastrophic crisis. The Emperor, in a panic, has commanded you to lead a gargantuan force of 100,000 veteran legionaries, the entire strategic reserve to reinforce the besieged northern garrison. As you initiate the grueling, rapid march across the sun-baked plains, your mind is focused not on the grand strategy, but on the small, critical details. The most pressing logistical issue isn't the complex logistics of food and water for men and beasts, which your quartermasters can manage, but the relentless, inevitable demands of biological necessity for 100,000 men, twice a day, every single day. You are a legendary disciplinarian, known for your meticulous standards and for winning campaigns others deemed impossible. You fully understand that discipline equals survival. You have issued a strict, non-negotiable order. All soldiers must adhere to a rigid, controlled sanitation schedule. They are to relieve themselves in designated, rotating groups of 20, and every single pit must be meticulously filled and compacted afterward. Any soldier caught violating this essential health and tactical discipline faces 30 lashes. But, as is the pattern of this new life, political interference, the unexpected variable strikes. During a midday halt, just as your men begin rotating to the designated temporary latrine areas, the imperial tribune, Lucius, sent by the emperor himself, explodes in a fit of rage. He is the emperor's privileged, zealous, and highly inexperienced political watchdog. Lucius vehemently criticizes your actions, yelling that your meticulous process is deliberately delaying the campaign and sacrificing vital time needed for the relief efforts. You calmly and patiently explain the logic. Tribune, this rotating system of sanitation, while seemingly slow, serves three vital purposes. First, it prevents soldiers from using bathroom breaks as an excuse for individual desertion. Second, it maintains order, preventing a chaotic, undisciplined dispersal of troops. And most crucially, it ensures the immediate, total burying of waste. This maintains tactical secrecy. We leave no trace of our numbers or speed. You argue for nearly half an hour, detailing the historical plagues that decimated armies due to poor sanitation. But the tribune, Lucius, is unmoved. He is focused only on the clock and the emperor's decree for speed. He dramatically pulls out a scroll, bearing the imperial seal, declaring that the emperor has granted him full flexibility and final say in all matters of pace and urgency. Your orders are superseded, General, he shouts, his voice echoing over the resting troops. Effective immediately, I authorize all legionaries to seek and use any suitable spot for their immediate needs. Speed is paramount. You watch, appalled, as tens of thousands of soldiers scatter across the landscape, searching frantically for secluded spots, digging shallow, temporary pits. Your heart sinks into a deep, cold dread. Your past experience screams that this is not merely an inconvenience, but a fatal strategic error. As your 100,000-man army surges forward, closer to the war zone, the tribune is focused solely on the impressive distance covered, but your veteran senses are screaming. Enemy reconnaissance scouts, the vigilantes, are certainly hidden on the distant ridges. They will use the vast, dispersed trail of visible, unburied waste to their full advantage. They can easily estimate your exact troop numbers by the volume of refuse, deduce your marching speed and schedule by the decomposition rate, and even analyze your diet and general health by the composition of the waste itself. The enemy will know everything. You rush to the tribune, Lucius, one final time, laying out the undeniable tactical risks. But the tribune dismisses your concerns entirely, folding his arms dismissively. General, he scoffs, you are a brilliant warrior, but surely you haven't lost your nerve over a few droppings. We must move. Facing this politically insulated imperial proxy, you are forced to back down. The disastrous freedom to relieve themselves anywhere quickly becomes a lax habit among the soldiers, and every time your massive army makes camp, the entire area rapidly becomes saturated with the sickening, overpowering stench of waste. The tribune, Lucius, the emperor's representative, remains obstinate. He views your professional concerns about secrecy and sanitation not as tactical necessities, but as excuses to defy his imperial authority and slow the campaign. You, General Magnus Valerius, are forced to continuously concede ground to this politically untouchable obstacle, because the soldiers are allowed to relieve themselves anywhere in ditches, behind tents, and along the march route, and are no longer required to cover their waste. The health and tactical integrity of your army suffer immediately. Every time your vast 100,000-man army makes camp, the area rapidly becomes saturated with a sickening, pungent stench. The air thickens with the smell of refuse, attracting clouds of flies and insects. Tribune, Lucius, accustomed only to the scented halls of the capital, finds the unsanitary conditions unbearable. He is constantly agitated, restless, and unable to find proper repose. He frequently interrupts the soldiers' designated rest periods, often before they have recovered from the day's rigorous 20-mile march, urging you to break camp early and press on. General, the smell is intolerable. We must maintain speed and distance. Why are we lingering here, inviting sickness? If you dare to show even a moment of hesitation, or suggest the troops require adequate rest, Lucius immediately raises his voice and threatens you with the charge of delaying the time of combat, a crime punishable by immediate demotion or even execution. He constantly reminds you that the Emperor has given him the absolute authority to enforce his view of maximum urgency. You are left with the catastrophic choice of either risking your command or sacrificing your army's fighting capability. You choose the latter, hoping to reach the northern garrison before total collapse. The results are devastatingly predictable. The legionaries, already low in morale due to the constant, forced pace, are now forced to live, eat, and attempt to sleep, surrounded by the overwhelming stench and filth. The camp, meant to be a place of recovery, becomes a foul cesspool of human waste. Their already low morale sinks to a new, dangerous low. They whisper that the gods have abandoned them due to the filth. One sweltering afternoon, you sit in your command tent, heavily contemplating how you can possibly win a battle with troops this exhausted and demoralized. You are desperate for a solution, but suddenly your aide-de-camp bursts in, his face pale and eyes wide with terror. General, we have a crisis. Thousands of our soldiers are suffering from relentless diarrhea and dysentery. The sickness is spreading through the central legions with terrifying speed. You leap to your feet, your blood running instantly cold. This is the precise, predicted consequence of Lucius's political folly. The tribune, Lucius, hearing the commotion, finally stumbles out of his tent, his face gray. He recognizes the true gravity of the situation. A contagion could wipe out the army, but he stands huddled in the corner, speechless and trembling, shrinking into himself like a frightened child. You fix him with a furious glare, a silent acknowledgement that his political interference has brought this disaster upon your men, and you, immediately, issue a flurry of frantic, disciplined orders. The sick must be isolated immediately in a separate, hastily constructed infirmary camp far downwind. All soldiers who had close contact with the ill are to be quarantined and prohibited from using the same cook fires or wells. All new human waste must be buried deep at least 3 feet, 1 meter down end. Entire area disinfected with every available ounce of lime and ashdod. Fortunately, due to your swift professional reaction, the contagion is discovered and contained early, and the spread remains, for the moment, manageable. However, this sudden upheaval, coupled with the existing low morale, throws the troops into a state of extreme panic and dread. Every shadow, every unusual noise, makes everyone tense and hypervigilant. You silently pray to the gods that no further disaster befalls your already crippled army. The dysentery crisis, while contained by your swift action, has left a gaping wound in the morale of your 100,000 legionaries. The already low spirits have plummeted, replaced by a pervasive sense of fear and desperation. The soldiers are exhausted, ill, and terrified of both the unseen enemy of disease and the enemy waiting ahead. Even the slightest breeze or sound of rustling grass causes intense, widespread anxiety. You, General Magnus Valerius, sit awake in your tent night after night, analyzing the maps, knowing the situation is fragile. You desperately pray to the martial gods for a few more days of calm time to rest the men and rebuild a semblance of order. The tribune Lucius, now thoroughly shamed and utterly silent, remains in his tent, trembling. He is no longer concerned with speed. His only concern is self-preservation, praying that the Emperor never learns the true cause of this near catastrophe. But as you feared, the crisis of discipline inevitably leads to a crisis of control that happens deep in the darkest hours before dawn. A soldier, needing to relieve himself, rushes out of his sleeping tent, disoriented and exhausted. He loses his way in the maze of canvas and accidentally stumbles directly into the wrong cohorts. Area small. Dark encampment reserved for the Northern Iberian, OXILIARIES. Dot in the pitch black. Someone from the auxiliary unit, hypervigilant and strung out from fear, lets out a panicked shriek. Enemy attack. The Sarthians are upon us. They've breached the lines. The cry instantly ignites the collective terror. Hundreds of sleep-deprived, disease-fearing soldiers burst from their tents. They don't take the time to organize or ascertain the threat. They grab their weapons and lash out at anything that moves in the darkness. Chaos reigns supreme. Swords flash uncontrollably in the firelight. Men are yelling conflicting orders, screaming warnings, and roaring in blind panic. You instantly recognize the sound of a full-scale Rutan army, destroying itself from within. You immediately gather your most trusted personal guard, your Praetorian Corps, lead them directly into the center of the fray. You risk your own life, personally striking down more than a dozen crazed, panicked soldiers. You scream your name and your rank, pleading with the confused legions to regain their composure. It takes hours of grueling, bloody effort. It is not until the first slivers of morning light break over the camp that you and your finally manage to subdue the worst of the melee and restore some semblance of order. The sun rises to reveal a horrific scene. Dozens of Ethylene legionaries lie dead or severely wounded, not by the enemy, but by their own comrades. The army has suffered a grievous internal wound. The already rock-bottom morale has completely collapsed. The troops are now terrified of each other, afraid to sleep, and incapable of trusting the man next to them. But amidst the destruction, you find an unexpected grim consequence of the night's violence. The imperial tribune Lucius, who had scurried out of his tent in the initial panic, was caught in the crossfire. He was cut down by the panicked blades of his own legionaries. The political obstacle, the representative of the emperor's ill-informed authority, is violently removed. As you stand over the body of the tribune, you realize that while you have one less problem to report to the emperor, you now have a far larger problem to explain: the near destruction of your army. And then, just as you begin contemplating the dispatch you must send to the capital, a chilling sound cuts through the morning air: the unmistakable horns and drums of the enemy Sarthian war host. The chilling sound of the Sarthian war horns shatters the fragile dawn. The enemy has chosen this precise moment when your legions are exhausted, demoralized, and physically sick from a night of self-slaughter to launch their decisive strike. General Magnus Balleries, quickly mount your horse and ride to the nearest vantage point, your mind racing to grasp the tactical situation. You look out over the horizon and see the full host of the Sarthian army, moving with speed and purpose, their ranks clean and disciplined. They are not merely scouting, they are forming up for an immediate, full-scale assault. Your veteran eyes immediately spot the fatal flaw in the Sarthian deployment. They are approaching from a direction you had deemed impossible for them to know. They should have been ambushed by your forward light cavalry, yet they are advancing unmolested, directly toward your weakest flank. A crushing, terrifying realization hits you with the force of a cavalry charge. Your worst fear, which the tribune Lucius had mocked, has come true. Your army's sanitation negligence betrayed you. You recall your earlier fears. Enemy scouts, the vigilantes, operating unseen on the distant ridges. They did not need a spy in your ranks. They needed only their eyes and their wits. The Sarthian scouts had likely discovered the highly dispersed, unburied, and massive trail of human waste stretching back for dozens of miles. By analyzing the concentration and freshness of the waste scattered across the fields, they were able to accurately calculate your exact troop numbers. 100,000 men. Determine your trajectory and marching speed. Identify your recent stopping points in camp, locations. The enemy did not ambush you by chance. They simply followed the literal trail of filth you left behind, tracked your movements over days, deduced your destination, and carefully positioned their entire army for a crushing ambush at the moment of your maximum vulnerability. The tribune insistence on speed at all costs. The very directive that caused your sanitation collapse was a gift to the Sarthians. You stare at the advancing enemy, their horns blaring across the plains. Your legions, having endured dysentery, exhaustion, and a night of fighting their own comrades, are incapable of mounting a cohesive defense. Their formation is ragged. Their morale is zero. Even the death of the tribune Lucius, the primary cause of your misfortune, is now a political complication, not a strategic advantage. You send frantic orders to form a defensive square, but your commands are met with slow, disorganized movement. The chain of command is broken. The spirit is extinguished. "We are ready, General," shouts your aide-de-camp. Fear thick in his voice. You look at him. The despair absolute. You know the battle is already lost. A well-disciplined army attacks an ill-disciplined one. An army with strategic awareness attacks an army that has openly broadcast its every move. The Sarthian host descends upon your lines. The Sarthian charge hits your lines like a tidal wave crashing into sand. Your legions, already broken in spirit, do not fight. They simply scatter. The defense collapses instantly, turning into a panicked, self-preserving rout. You watch in grim horror as 100,000 men, the Emperor's last great reserve, are slaughtered and dispersed. Across the plains, you, General Magnus Balleries, fight until your personal guard is cut down and your sword is shattered. You are one of the few high-ranking commanders left alive, left to witness the complete, crushing defeat. The battle is a total catastrophe. The reinforcements never reached the northern garrison. The Sarthians now hold a clear path into the heartland of the Ethylene Empire. After the remnants of your army are rounded up or flee, you are forced to return to the capital, not as the glorious savior, but as the bearer of the most terrible news. You prepare yourself for the inevitable fury of the Emperor. Weeks later, you stand shackled before the Emperor in his grand hall, the silence more condemning than any accusation. The Emperor's face is cold stone. Scenato Valeria's, the Emperor's voice booms, heavy with disappointment and anger. You commanded the largest army ever assembled on the northern road. How did you lose them? The official report states that the enemy knew your every move, and that a plague and internal riot decimated your ranks before the Sarthians even engaged. What is your defense? You look up, your voice steady despite the shackles. You describe every detail, your initial, necessary sanitation orders, the political interference of the tribune, Lucius, the forced marches, the dysentery, the panic, the deadly riot, and finally, the ultimate betrayal of your own men's refuse. You conclude, Your Majesty, the army was defeated, not by the Sarthian skill, but by indiscipline forced upon us by the tribune's authority. The enemy simply followed the trail of unburied waste we left. A single failure of discipline led to tactical exposure, plague, internal chaos, and total defeat. The tribune, acting in your name, ensured our destruction. The emperor listens, his expression unreadable. He has already received the reports about Lucius's unauthorized actions and his violent death. The emperor knows you speak the bitter, painful truth. He knows that his own impulse to speed and his appointment of the zealous, ignorant tribune were the root cause. But the emperor is an emperor. He cannot admit fault, especially not to a defeated general. Your analysis of the enemy's intelligence gathering is astute, the emperor finally says, the anger receding into cold judgment. But a great general must be able to manage all variables of foolish tribunes and base human needs. You allowed a political fool to break the discipline of your professional army. For this failure to maintain absolute control over the instruments given to you, the emperor pauses, letting the finality hang in the air. ... You are hereby stripped of all titles and commands. You will be confined to the dungeons, where you will spend the rest of your days writing your full account of this disastrous campaign, so that future generations may understand the fatal consequences of poor discipline. You are dragged away, resigned. You know the emperor will use your detailed report to teach his future generals the paramount importance of military discipline and sanitation, a lesson paid for with the lives of 100,000 men. As the iron door slams shut behind you, you reflect on the true, unchanging law of command, whether it is the emperor's politics or the soldier's waste. Every single variable must be controlled, or it will control you.